Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this Ask Me Anything hosted by Appleruth Tutoring Services. Tonight we have Selective colleges getting in and thriving. We're going to have a great conversation tonight. My name is Bess. I'll be moderating the discussion, and I'm going to allow our panelists from our Selective colleges to introduce themselves. First, let me tell you that you can see and hear us. We can't see you or hear you. However, I want to encourage you all to ask questions using the Q&A feature in this webinar. If you have to leave for any reason, know that a recording of this webinar will be made available to you, but do feel free to ask questions of our panelists as we go. And we're just going to have a great conversation about getting into college and doing well there. So I'm going to allow everyone to introduce themselves. Please tell us your name, your pronouns, if you'd like to share them, the year that you are, and the college that you're attending. I'm Bess, she, her, hers. I'll be the moderator this evening. Evan, why don't we start with you?
Sure. My name's Evan, he, him, his. I'm going to be a sophomore at the University of Vermont, and I'm enrolled in the Honors College there.
Thank you, Evan. And Claudia?
Hi, everyone. My name is Claudia. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am class of 2021. So I just graduated from Barnard at Columbia University.
Thank you, Claudia. And Henry?
Nice to meet everyone. My name is Henry Schwan. I go by the He series, and I was accepted into Harvard University last year, but due to the pandemic, I decided to take a gap year. So I will be actually a rising freshman this fall.
Fantastic. And Henry, you are going to get questions about your gap year for sure. I'm a big believer in the gap year. So please, everyone, feel free to ask those questions. So as questions fill into the Q&A, I want to pose to, especially to Claudia and Evan. However, Henry, I don't know if you were able to visit Harvard and you might have an answer for this, you might not. I want to start with this. If students watching tonight could visit you on your campus, where would you take them so that they could get a real sense of the personality of your school? And I'll let either Claudia or Evan start with that.
I guess I can go first. That's okay. Yeah, I would take you to Low Steps, which is, I would say, probably at the center of Columbia, because I think it reflects the importance that being in New York City plays in your Barnard or Columbia education, and similarly, the role that Columbia and Barnard play in creating the New York City fabric, which is really exciting. And if you go high enough on the steps, you're able to see downtown New York, which is very beautiful. And so it reminds you that you get to have this great education in a really great city as well.
I love that. It's very much a part of the city. It's fantastic. What about you, Evan? What do you think?
So I would take you to probably the library. I think on my tour, this is probably the place that sold me on UVM. It's 3 floors. The first floor is connected to a residence hall and probably the best dining hall on campus. So you get a lot of flow. There's a lot of noise on the first floor. Lots of people, big tables, people studying during the day. Off-campus students congregate there because it's right on central campus near all their classes. And then you also have on-campus students. So it's a great mix of people. Second floor is a little quieter. And then the third floor is like silent study. So it's just like a gathering of people all the time. It was a little different during COVID, but that's the place I would take you for sure.
I love that because it sounds like a really central hub, and it's kind of like all access to everything meaningful on campus that isn't a classroom. I really like that a lot. Henry, did you get to tour Harvard at all? I don't know about your timeline.
So unfortunately, I didn't get to take an official tour, but I did go there for a debate tournament back sophomore year of high school. So I have very vague recollections, but if I were to answer your question, I would kind of piggyback off of what Evan said, and I would go with our dining hall, or freshman dining hall specifically. It's called Annenberg, but the students call it the Berg for short. The Berg is a magical place. It's the freshman dining hall where everyone, no matter which exact yard that you belong to, everyone goes there for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And what's great about the Berg is that I think it's really representative of what Harvard and what Harvard's energy is all about. Because not only do you eat there, you also have the opportunity to connect, to hear stories, to talk about, in upcoming class, talk about struggles. And there's a lot of camaraderie that's built there, and it's the start of all the friendships at Harvard. And that's a place that I'm very excited to spend a lot of time at. Which is funny because if you say, where are you going to spend a bunch of time at? People would say library or the dorms. For most Harvard students, I would say the dining hall.
So you're going to make all of your new best friends at the Berg?
Yeah.
Cool, I'm cool with the lingo. I got it. Excellent. So I'm going to take Claudia way back and Evan just a little bit back and Henry to like yesterday. And I'm going to ask, what advice would you give to a student who is in the midst of the application process and hoping to get admitted to your school? And that can really be a plethora of things. It can be, what a sophomore student should focus on, what kind of extracurriculars you might say, or maybe don't worry so much about this or that. So yeah, what advice would you give to a student who was working on their application now in order to really make them appeal to your school? And I think I can offer that to all three of you. So whoever would like to answer it first can go for it. Evan looks like he's got some.
So I would say, resume building is good, building your application, doing things that, look good for selective colleges, but also just kind of follow what interests you as soon as you can, because that's going to save you time and energy later. I've spent a lot of time this past year, my freshman year, picking classes, trying to figure out what major I'm going to end up sticking with. And I think if you just, focus on things that really get you fired up as soon as you can, that's going to make applying to college easier because they're going to see that you're passionate about something. And I think that is what means the most.
I really like that. And just a reminder to everyone, you can talk to us, you can ask questions of us by clicking on your Q&A tab at the bottom of your Zoom screen. But I really like what Evan just said, because it's not necessarily about joining all of the clubs and playing all of the sports and spreading yourself super, super thin. Rather, it's about showing what you're passionate about. I think colleges would rather see that you were really dedicated to Spanish club, right? You did it 8th grade all the way through junior year, rather than you did a whole bunch of different clubs and just spread yourself really thin, right? Like, are you the kid who did marching band? Are you the kid who, was an athlete for, both in the spring and in the fall, right? Things like that. They want to know the story of you, the things that you're passionate about is what Evan was saying, rather than trying to do a little bit of everything. Do what you love and show them who you are as a person. Show them what makes you you and what you'll bring to campus. Claudia, do you have any other advice that you would give?
Definitely. Yeah, I agree with Bess and Evan. The point of passion is really important. And I think that it should be emphasized that a lot of people have really great scores and really great grades and really great stories to tell and whatnot. And while academics are extremely important, what is also important is what at the end of the day you care about and what you want to go to college to do, right? So kind of when you think about it from that point of view, instead of thinking about how am I going to get into this college, more like why do I think that I want to go to this college and what can I learn from it? Equally, what can I contribute to it? So when you ask yourself those questions and at the same time recognize that even if, your classmate seems like they're doing everything in the world, it doesn't really matter whether or not you're doing everything in the world. It matters that you're using your time wisely to create a future and an impact and what kind of impact you'd like to make in the future that going to that specific college might help you do. So I think definitely as early on as this may be, some of you might know where you want to go to college right now, and you might be a freshman. Some of you might be rising seniors and have no idea where you want to go to college, but kind of looking at putting aside everything about the college except for what it offers academically and extracurricularly and community-wise, how you feel that you match with that to achieve your goals, I think is a really important way to look at it.
Claudia, I love that because it's not just, oh, I hope the college picks me. It's also you picking the college, right? It's also like, let me find the passionate fit for me. I love it. I think we frequently lose sight of that, especially when we're talking about selective colleges and honors colleges. Henry, do you have any advice, or do you feel like it's sort of akin to that?
Yeah, I think kind of going off what Claudia says of trying to find a college that not only fits you, but you also fit that college. I think a big part in order to save yourself a lot of stress, as I saw in the questions, my number one advice is just to start early and is to plan it out. Especially if you know you're going to be applying to several colleges, it's always a good idea to start as early as possible and not wait till the last minute. And I know that people say that all the time, but believe me, I saw so many of my classmates who started their supplemental essays the night before the application.
That stressed me out. You just said that, and I immediately went, "Oh no, the night before! That sounds awful."
And honestly, that's a habit that a lot of students I feel like develop throughout high school, which is studying the night before an exam. And sometimes it works, but I'm willing to bet more often than not it backfires and it induces a lot of stress. So for me personally, there are certain things that part of the application that stay constant every year. The biggest part of that is the common application essay, the 750 words, your main essay essentially. So what I did was I started drafting my Common App essay starting the summer before 12th grade, which, saying that to some of my friends, they were like, "Are you crazy? Like, that's so early. Like, get a life." Like, why are you spending your summer working on college apps? And looking back, that was probably one of the best decisions I did, because you have to keep in account that you're going to have multiple revisions on these essays throughout the months and weeks leading up to the due date. Because for me, I think I revised my Common App application. I think I had like 17 different revisions on it, which is definitely a little bit more on the extreme side, but I've definitely seen friends with more than that. And that was, I totally scrapped my essay at one point. Like, I was just like, what am I writing? Like, this isn't me. And for a lot of people, if writing isn't your forte and if expressing yourself through your writing isn't your thing, then give yourself that grace, give yourself that time in order to prepare and have time that you can fall back on if things don't work out, or if you realize, okay, this is not where I want to go. You still have a lot of time to start over, etc.
Henry, you kind of got two birds with one stone there. Because we have this question, how did you all deal with the nerves of applying to college, right? And I think that you can kind of answer that for maybe students coming up. How should they deal with the nerves? And how do you deal with the fear of rejection from colleges? And Henry, I thought that you gave really good advice in terms of like how you could be successful in your application, and also I think curbing those nerves. So I wonder if you have any other advice, but for Evan and Claudia, can either of you think of like, oh, how did you deal with the nervousness of applying to college, and how did you deal with the fear of rejection from some of the colleges that you applied to?
I can start on this because I was hit with a couple rejections for sure. I think I would say two things. One, fear of rejection, I feel like it stems from kind of your own insecurities of, okay, I need to get in this college or else, or else it's people are going to think this of me, or else, I'm people like, I'm not going to look good in front of my peers and friends, etc. But for me, it's just having that self-confidence in yourself. But I think self-confidence starts from putting in that work early, but more importantly, doing everything you possibly can in order to prepare. I think something that always like calmed me down was, when I got nervous before the results, was recognizing, okay, Henry, you did everything you possibly could. You spent countless hours on those essays. You talked to your teachers. You spent all 4 years building up your resume for this. I've done everything I possibly can. There's nothing else I could have done. And if the college still rejected me, like that's their fault. You know, there's nothing I can do at that point. You know, that's their loss. It was kind of like what I was telling myself, because I believed, you know, that I would have made a good contribution to the college, and maybe this just wasn't meant to be. The other thing I'll say is that if you are religious, I feel like religion is a big part of just having that self-confidence in your identity, and that recognizing that, hey, like at the end of the day, if this wasn't meant to be, it wasn't meant to be. Like God has bigger plans for me out there, and maybe like he closed this door, but he's going to open another door for sure. Yeah.
I Preparedness is such a good I want to say way to prepare for nerves, but you're really right. If you really give it your all and you know that you've done the best that you can, you're far more willing to just sort of let the chips fall where they may, so to speak, because you know you gave it your all. I love that. Claudia, what do you think? How do you deal with those nerves?
Yeah, they can definitely be very overwhelming. But I think kind of what's most important to realize is that at the end of the day, many colleges and many universities offer so many excellent and exciting and fun academic and extracurricular programs, and that I think, especially having graduated recently, looking back on my 4 years, it's so much more about what you take advantage of academically and extracurricularly, and how you spend your time, where you spend your time. Are you going to club events? Are you going to office hours, right? Are you getting to know your professors really well? And that's so much more obviously focused on your experience once you arrive there. That it definitely should be said that there's a lot of focus on maybe rankings or where a school stands. And there are a lot of things that go into those rankings. First of all, I think that should be said. And second of all, your happiness is not necessarily on that ranking, right? So it's not even about the name of the school. It's more about, do you fit with those programs? And so even maybe getting rejected from a school that you thought you were in love with the programs there and you thought that you would be the best fit, there are so many other schools where you can find a similar experience. And even if it might seem like a completely opposite type of school, it's up to you, in my opinion, to try to make the most of that out of that experience. And the other thing that I was going to say was that kind of dealing with the fear and being prepared, although there are a lot of things that go into it that you cannot control, right? There are thousands of applications and a lot of things happen along the way. What you can do is make sure that you're doing everything that you can and making sure that you're conveying the correct message about who you really are and what you're really going to contribute, and that you're focusing on developing that passion in your 4 years of high school, or your 1 year that you might have left, instead of focusing on numbers or doing all the activities in the world, right? So I think that it's important to focus on that. And kind of as Henry said, at the end of the day, all you can do is what you can do, right? And just having confidence in that and confidence in yourself. But most importantly, realizing is that you really can go anywhere and you can do great things. So being easy on yourself in that sense and being calm and collected about it is what I would suggest.
Before I let Evan answer, because I'm absolutely going to let him answer, what I think I hear Henry and Claudia saying is this idea that if you do everything you can do and you're being true to yourself, a rejection doesn't reflect you, right? There are tons of applications to every school. You never really know what gets you in and what doesn't, because there are a lot of things that go into an application. But if you know that you're confident in you and you're pursuing what you're passionate in and you're prepared and you are able to put your best foot forward, there is no need to take a rejection personally. And Claudia's right. There are, almost 4,000 colleges and universities in America, in the American education system. And the one dream school that you want, that you really, really wanted to go to, there are other colleges that would be an amazing fit for you if that one decides, for any number of reasons out of your control, that you're not going to be a good fit for them, right? So if you put your best foot forward, you really can have faith in that, have confidence in that. All right, Evan, how do you deal with those nerves?
Well, I think a lot of what needs to be said has already been said. Preparedness, being true to yourself. You have a plan, you've been doing your research. I can definitely remember 11th and 12th grade, almost every conversation I had with like a relative or, family members, people that I would meet, they'd be like, oh, you're in 11th grade. you're going to do your senior year of high school, whatever, where are you going to college? Like, what are you thinking? And they, everyone always has questions, everyone wants to know, but, often you don't even know the answers to those questions. So I think dealing with that would stress me out more than I even would have been on my own. Definitely. So I think part of it is just putting up blinders, knowing that you have your plan, you're doing your research, and being okay with your plan B, your plan C, because why apply to them if you're not going to be happy with that? So yeah, it's kind of all been said.
And I think also just from all three of you, I'm getting the sense that like it does work out, right? Like you have your reach schools, your schools that you're pretty confident in, and some safety schools, and you do end up at a good fit for you. It all works out. Everybody here has gone to college. Everybody here can tell you, yes, it's working out. Well, except for Henry, he's getting there. He's gonna go. He's getting there. So I want to ask
Sorry, can I
whoever.
jump in?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, like one more caveat I wanted to add, one more layer I wanted to add to this discussion is that in terms of the timeline, when we're talking about failure, a lot of failure happens in the initial stage. So there's the early application part, and then there's all the regular application stuff. So for me, for example, I didn't want to go to Harvard. Like that wasn't the goal at first. Like I wanted my early application applied to Yale, and they hit me with the deferral, their early application. And I thought I was never going to go to college. I was like, all right, like I'm just going to stay at home next 4 years. But I think that's why there are two stages, because it, gives you another chance essentially, and you can apply to a lot more schools when it comes to the regular application. For me, in my case, like Beth said, it all worked out at the end of the day, and you're going to end up where you're.
Yeah, I'm very sad for you, Henry, that you ended up having to go to Harvard. That's real wrong. I'm sorry about that. No, but so just to clarify what Henry is talking about here, he's talking about early action and early decision deadlines, which are excellent. They're a really, really good tool. You can express to a school if you apply early action, early decision. Usually early action and early decision deadlines are October 15th or November 15th. I believe that's correct, but check the schools. And you can express to them demonstrated interest. Early action, you can apply to several schools early action and say, I'm really interested in this school. Early decision is binding. So if you apply to a school early decision and they accept you, then you are committed to going to that school. And it's a good way to say, I'm really, really interested. And then Henry's right. If you're deferred to regular decision, you have another chance, you have another option, and you can open more doors. So that's actually an excellent tool. And I think a really good hedge against those nerves, right? Because you feel like you have more than one opportunity to show a school, hey, I think I'd be a really good fit here. Fantastic. Thank you for bringing that up, Henry. I'm glad that we were able to talk about early decision and early action. Okay. Anyone can answer this who wants, but no one has to. What's the biggest myth or stereotype of your school, and have you found it to be true? Is it true, Claudia? What's the myth? What's the stereotype?
I could say maybe a stereotype is that Barnard and Columbia students study a lot, which, that is true. I think most students at a lot of universities and colleges, pretty much obviously every college university, they study a lot. But on a more general level, I think that many of us might have these a knowledge of maybe myths or stereotypes that we've heard from older students that we know, or, classmates, whatever. But I think what's so special about college actually is that once you arrive there, if you have a really bad stereotype or a really great stereotype, you'll find that you're going to have your own interpretation of that. And so this is a little bit off a tangent, but going back kind of to what we were saying before, don't let those stereotypes or myths get in your way, because a stereotype or myth can exist for someone, but not someone else, right? I think that we all kind of play into myths and stereotypes. So regardless of what it may be, whether it's really great or really horrible, which I don't think many universities have horrible stereotypes or myths, you can still have a great experience, and you shouldn't let those get to you. But and I think that, being in high school, if I remember, those definitely did exist, and they're not fun to necessarily be around if it's not what you want to hear, but you need to be yourself and not let those stereotypes and myths get to you, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's a good point because I think that we do lean into those stereotypes. I went to a top public school that won't get mentioned here, but it was a Virginia State school. And the myth was everyone studies all the time and nobody has a social life. And you know what? That was true. And you know what? I was fine with it. That was totally okay. Henry or Evan, if you want to answer this, you can. If you feel like you want to pass on, Evan, what do you got?
Yeah, sure, I can answer. So UVM obviously is going to be a little different from some of these Ivy League schools. The stereotype is not that everyone studies all the time. For older generations, the UVM stereotype is that it's like a huge party school. And I think that's left over from when the drinking age in Vermont was still 18.
Mm.
So that is not true. It's not what they think. And then for younger people, UVM started to develop like a pot school reputation.
Really? Yeah.
And I would say that both of these are not true. I mean, there's truth to some stereotypes, but it's a big school. You meet a lot of people, and I think it's just to keep that in mind for every school's stereotype. If you're looking for, you'll find your people basically. It's what you make of it. Yeah.
Evan, I think that's a good thing to bring up too, because every school is going to have elements that anyone could take advantage of, right? So if you seek to go out and party, you'll be able to find it at any school. If you seek substances, you'll be able to find them at any school. But if you want to surround yourself with people who are focused and who, are there to get an education, focus on their major, and make a lot of friends along the way, you can find that. So I think Evan's point is really nice. And I think sometimes we forget that you think like, oh, I'm going to go to this school and that's only going to mean one thing. I'm only going to go to this school and I'm just going to, that's the party school or what have you. And you really can find your people at any school. Henry, did you have any thoughts?
No, I mean, you and Evan basically must have read my mind or something, because that was about exactly what I was going to say. I think the Ivy League stereotype, especially at Harvard when I was making my college decision, was that it's a bunch of rich, stuck up, cocky kids. Arrogant was a word thrown around. And that scared me. That legitimately scared me, because those weren't the kinds of people I wanted to surround myself around.
Yeah.
But I think that one cool thing about making a college decision is that colleges know that it's a hard decision sometimes. So a lot of colleges would have these kind of visitas kind of style where you get to interact with the other students, you get to go and interact with the admission officers, etc. Usually it's on campus, but last year it was virtual, and ours was called the Visitas Forum. And it was just a bunch of games and icebreakers. You got to meet the other students, participate in some mini competitions. I just gave it a try, and the people I met, through that program were anything but the stereotype. And like Evan said, I think all stereotype are rooted in X level amount of truth. But like Beth said, there's going to be all types of people there. So that, yeah, there might be some like cocky, people at Harvard, but you're also going to meet the really down to earth, genuine kinds of people. And it's a matter of who do you want to surround yourself with, right? Because those people are going to exist, not even it's going to be at every college, but it's going to be everywhere in life, right? Like when you go to work, you're going to meet those people. When you go to, when you go to other schools, like you're going to have those people everywhere. So it's more about you than the environment that you're going to be in.
That is such a good point. It's true. Like where you end up professionally as well, or if you go to graduate school, right? You're going to have all types of people everywhere. Yeah, I love that. That's an excellent point. Claudia, I see you're typing this answer, but I kind of want you to answer it for everybody. So I'm going to tell Kelly's question that she asked. There we go. She said, Claudia, do you feel there are any limitations of being in an all-girls school? And Claudia, I wanted you to answer that because Barnard is certainly not the only all-girls college. And I do wonder if you thought that there were any limitations there.
Yeah,
this is not a question for Evan or Henry.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think that I personally absolutely loved my experience at a women's college. It was so special because the environment and the community that's something that I actually sought out when I was applying to college. I wanted a very tight-knit community. And speaking from my experience at Barnard. Barnard offers that, and academically and extracurricularly, it has that very caring feeling that I think you could probably find at many specific colleges, I would say, but also as, for example, women's college. But there are other types of colleges that you could classify as with different specialties. But I wouldn't say there's any limitations at all in any capacity from my experience. But I should say that Barnard does have a university that's it's a part of Columbia University. So Barnard students have access to everything that Columbia students have access to. It is very fluid. There's a lot going on just across the street. So that definitely did shape my experience. And, being a part of a large research university, I should say too, definitely provided me with many opportunities. But from what I know from other women's colleges, I would not say that there are any limitations because it is a women's college. Now, it's obviously important to keep in mind that a women's college will have a different kind of environment because it is a women's college. So you have to know that if you're intending to apply to a women's college. But it's not going to have any limitations because it is a women's college. It just might be, a different kind of experience. I know that some women's colleges do not have partner universities, so you are not taking, they're all people that identify as women in your classes. In that case, that would be a different experience, but it's not a limiting experience, right? It's just a different experience, and definitely from my experience, a great one. But I think bottom line, I would not rule a school out or favor a school necessarily just because it is a women's college. There's a lot of things that go into it. But that said, I would totally recommend the experience because it was, or at least at Barnard, it was a very special experience.
Claudia, I'm going to ask you somewhat of a difficult question, and I'm not asking you to speak for the non-binary community, just what you observed. Would you recommend for a cisgendered female who maybe is non-binary, gender expressing, maybe use the pronouns they, them, theirs, would you recommend Barnard to them?
Yeah, so I obviously cannot speak to that experience because I do not identify
Cisgendered female. Mm-hmm.
But I do know that Barnard is an extremely welcoming school, and I could not see that there would be any issues to someone that identifies that way. And so, although it is important to keep in mind that that is obviously such an important part of your college experience, and so you should really make sure that you're, from how much you can tell from a school as a high schooler, you should really make sure that it is a welcoming environment. And I think Barnard, I would never say that it's not a welcoming environment. It is completely welcoming and a very inclusive, and it really values and actually prioritizes making its environment inclusive to people of all genders and all identities. So Barnard's great, but I think that in general, at all schools, that should be something that one might be thinking about, just to keep in the back, or however important it is to you, that is a really important thing that one should consider.
Yeah, you should seek out colleges that you feel like support you in your identity. I love that. Okay, let me look for another question to torture you all with. I think this might be another question for Claudia, but Henry and Evan might be able to answer this as well. Claudia, talk to me about the safety of the environment around your school based in New York City. Do you feel safe? What is accessible to you? What kind of measures are in place to keep the student body secure?
Yeah, that's a great question. Henry, you might have a similar answer, or you might have a similar experience when you arrive at Harvard, but Barnard and Columbia are in the center of New York City. So that's really magical and exciting, and definitely a really great part of your Barnard and Columbia experience. However, it is New York City, which is one of a very, very large city. A lot is going on. As with any city, any school in any city, any place in the world, there are safety concerns that might come with being in that city, and that is not necessarily the same safety concerns that you would have at a small college in a less metropolitan area. I have to say, at Barnard and Columbia, I felt perfectly safe at any and every moment. Barnard and Columbia both take it very seriously to make sure that its students are safe. There are, if I can remember, there are shuttles and vans that can take you from one point of the campus to the other. And, obviously depends on how big your campus is as well. I know that there are similar types of transportation on campuses that are not in cities, just because campuses can be very large. And, I think that every campus poses a degree of of risk there in terms of safety. But I think that the administration at Barnard and Columbia makes it a priority to make its students safe. And I have seen that in action, which is really great and very much appreciated. But, that said, anything can happen in a city. You have to be responsible for yourself. You have to always be alert, as you should be anywhere. One should always be alert. One should always be aware of these things. But I would not let safety concerns necessarily discourage you from attending a university or a college in a city, because it's a really special, great experience. And for the most part, I think that colleges and universities take really great steps to ensure the safety of students, or of their students.
Excellent. You didn't feel, you always felt safe there. That's fantastic. Evan, I'm wondering, because University of Vermont is a much different setting, what kind of safety measures are in place there?
Right. So it's not an urban school. It is in Burlington, Vermont, which is like a tiny town compared to New York City. I live right outside New York, and go to school in Burlington. So it feels like I'm going to, the countryside, but it still is a metropolitan area. There's access on campus to the Burlington bus line, which is free for students to use. There is, I won't lie to you, there is a homeless problem in Burlington for sure, and it's apparent when you go downtown. But it's also a great town, and the university definitely takes safety as a priority. And I don't recall anyone mentioning that they've ever felt unsafe. Every school on a tour will tell you about their blue light system, which is anywhere on campus you can see at least one blue light, which is where there's like a help button and a call box for emergency services. And they say there's less than a 2-minute response. Anytime you press one of those buttons, don't test it because they'll get mad. But yeah, I think anything can happen anywhere. But schools definitely take safety as a priority. So parents, don't worry. Your kids will be fine. They can take care of themselves, and the schools are looking out for them.
I love that. And I think, Henry, Harvard also has a blue light system. I don't know if you noticed when you were there. Do you know? Yeah. I assume that they do. I think that's a very safe assumption. Excellent. Yeah, most colleges do, and their response times are really real. And Evan is right. Don't test it, because they will send everything out to you to make sure that you're okay. All right, everybody. How's the food? What you got for me, Claudia?
I do not have a very particular palate, but so I have to say Columbia dining and Barnard dining is fantastic. Barnard actually recently renovated its main dining hall. Also, I should mention that both Barnard and Columbia are extremely committed to providing all sorts of food accommodations. So halal, kosher, vegan, gluten-free, anything you can really think of, it will be accommodated. And if it's not apparently accommodated, then you can make arrangements and they will be very open to help you with that. But I think it's really great. Of course, that is such a subjective question, I suppose, but I think it's great. And I think we sort of spoke about this, dining halls being a place of friendships and social interactions and sometimes even studying, just a really integral part of campus. And so I was very fortunate that I had access to, I think, 4 or 5 dining halls. And so, each dining hall had its culture, its characteristics. And that was really fun, and they're great hours. So if you're someone like me who's studying at 2, 3 in the morning, they're going to be open, or at least one of them is going to be open. Or if you're up, sometimes like me as well, at 6 or 7, there'll be something that's open, which is nice. So 100%, I really enjoyed it. But we're also in New York City, so if you don't like the dining food offered by your university, you have an entire city of food from many different places, which is nice.
Y'all, this is an important question. We got to know how the food is. Evan, I saw you kind of nodding when Claudia was talking about accommodations too, to dietary needs.
Yeah, absolutely. I think most schools, or they should at least, accommodate almost anything. The food at my school is dining hall food. There is one dining hall it's newer, and it's known to have better food. And I'm a food person, so I agree that's where the good food is. At the end of the day, though, it's dining hall food. You got to eat. at the end of the semester, I am excited to come home and have a kitchen and make food for myself. But no, it's not bad. It's good.
I'm gonna come back to this question about campus housing as well, because I do think that that's sort of akin to, okay, what is it like to actually live there and eat the food and live on campus? But Henry, I actually have a question for you before I forget. So I know that you chose to take a gap year because of the pandemic. Is that correct? And then, but students will choose to take a gap year for a variety of reasons. Can you let us know? It was a little bit harder during the pandemic because everything was shut down, but what you chose to do with your gap year?
Yeah, I mean, I think you brought up a great point. A lot of colleges now are in fact encouraging their students to take a gap year, and that was happening even before the pandemic. Harvard, especially, there's a research paper online written by some Harvard professors talking about just this generation of students are just so burnt out before even going to college, and that burnt out was from high school. So that's only exacerbated when you go into college. So they talk about the benefits with taking a gap year program. And in fact, they encourage their students to take a gap year. So I think with my class, we had record number of gappers. I think we had around 250 out of a class of like 1,700. So
Wow.
those aren't the exact number, but overall, it was like almost a fourth of the class. Yeah,
Mhm.
my numbers are off. So what I did specifically was when I was making my decision, you were right, a lot of programs are shut down. The most common gap year options are to travel or to take some sort of program. Like studying in India, for instance, or going out to sea. I know a lot of people did that. So for me specifically, I was part of the Vanguard program that's affiliated with Wheaton College. So it's a Christian outdoor leadership kind of based program. So we were in the Northwoods of Wisconsin. So quite literally in the middle of nowhere. So which was good because it meant we were safe from COVID.
Right.
So we did a lot of outdoorish kind of activities, whether that was, we did backpacking trips to Lake Superior. We kayaked down the Chattahoochee. We went on rock climbing trips at Devil's Rock. So we traveled around a lot and did a lot of like intense outdoor activities. We also had classes with professors who came in, and that was the more Christian part of the program. And we also had work rotations. So I got to work in the kitchen for a little bit, work in construction, the barn, worked on our media team. So the more practical kind of skills. So when I go to college, I know how to cook for myself, that kind of deal. But yeah, like overall, like I've just taken away so much from this year. It was a really great way to decompress and take away from that stress from high school. It also gave me so much time to just kind of just sit back and just slow down, right? Because in high school, everything is go, 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 go. Like how often are we able to just take a breather from that? And that was really good for me because it gave me more time to reflect and to read and to kind of figure out like, hey, what is it that I really want to do in life? Like it's more than just high school to college to work. Like there's more, there's so many options that you can pursue. And for me, it was like, okay, it affirmed that I did want to go into economics, but also it taught me, hey, like I do really care about people. So what can I do to help people in the world? So that led me to all kinds of like social justice kind of involvements that I would definitely be involved with in college. So those are just things I would have never had the time or the energy to do if it was just one summer from senior year to college. So for anyone who's applying, just keep this in mind because a year ago, I didn't even know what a gap year was.
That's actually, I'm glad you brought that up because people assume that in a gap year you want to work or you want to do a program, you want to go abroad. You can use a faith-based program as a way into your gap year as well. Like you can use different organizations that you wouldn't necessarily think of. And I'm a big fan of the gap year because I do think there's a lot of burnout and you can take some time to really figure out what it is that maybe you're headed to and you want to do. So I want to go to this sort of more fun question. Can you share a bit on the quality of campus housing at your respective schools? I wonder if anyone has, like, the freshmen have to be on campus, right? Is that, for me, for my undergrad, it was required that freshmen lived on campus. But who would like to talk about the housing? Evan, tell us about housing.
Sure. So freshmen and sophomores at my school are required to be on campus. There's lots of different dorms. They're all different. I will say I am in the honors college housing, which is a bonus for sure. Each room pretty much has its own bathroom, which is good and bad. It's private, but you do have to clean it. Also, my school has something called learning communities, which determines where you live. So there's sustainability, arts and creativity, outdoor experience. Honors College is one of the learning communities. Then there's, leadership and social change and a few others. The wellness environment, they try and hook you with that by putting you in the nicest, newest dorms, which is the dorms connected to the library, connected to the best dining hall on campus. They were built in 2017. So those are great places to live. Then there's, dorms that were built in the 1960s, and they're still there and students are still living in them. So it's kind of what you get. I think everyone has a good time. I don't think anyone, after a few weeks, it really cares where they're living. You just make the most of it.
I love that, because I also feel like Claudia's going to have a different answer to that. Tell us. I love the two perspectives of these two colleges, one that's in a city and one that's super not. This is great. This is so useful. Tell us, Claudia. Tell us everything.
Or what maybe you could imagine of New York City. I think in every apartment building or any sort of building, you're going to have challenges that make New York City so great. New York City housing. I'm joking, but no, you do have these, many, I believe the dorms you could say are in old apartment buildings, and many dorms, not necessarily freshman dorms, but definitely as you get older, those dorms are technically apartments that have just been cut up into dorms. So you have to expect that kind of style. So at Barnard, I wouldn't necessarily say they look like your classic dorms because of that you might find in a more or whatever you would think of a traditional dorm would be, but they're great. What I really loved about my freshman year at Barnard was that all freshmen those living on campus live in this building called the Quad, and it's shaped as a quad. And it's really awesome because it's only freshmen for the most part, and it's they're all your classmates. They're in your first year seminars. You're interacting with each other, so it's a really great community building environment. Obviously some have air conditioning, others don't. So it would be helpful to get a fan, whatever, stuff like that. But you overcome it. And does any freshman really have the perfect dorm experience? I think that's what makes freshman year so fun. And I can speak to Columbia's dorms as well. There are many different options that even as a freshman there, you can choose to have a roommate, you can choose to have a single, which I think is very beneficial for many people if you would prefer to be in your first year in a single, because that could be for many people what they want. And they're very nice dorms at both Columbia and Barnard, but Columbia has its main, I would say probably its most popular, because I think it's the biggest freshman building, called Carmen. They have recently, I think, 5 new renovated floors or something like that, and they're in the process of renovating the whole thing. So it's really beautiful and a really great way to live in New York City for the first time for many people who attend Barnard and Columbia.
I love that. Henry, are you getting nervous about your freshman dorm situation now? For the end of August when you move in, you're a little bit. And then I just had a general question that, are there people who clean the bathroom facilities that are shared? Yes. If they're private, no. Evan's cleaning his bathroom on his own. But if there's a shared hallway bathroom, yes, the facilities will take care of that kind of thing. Yes, certainly. So I think we're almost at the end of our time. So I just wanted to ask all of you a question about sort of your future plans, right? So, and it's okay if your answer is, Bess, I have no idea. But the question is, how has the school that you've chosen to attend, and Henry, I'm asking you to kind of look in the future here, facilitated your goals for after school for when you graduate? So I certainly think that Claudia is probably in the best position to have the most foresight on this, but I want to hear from Henry and Evan as well. The school that you chose, how do you think that that facilitated your growth to after school, to after you graduate? What are your goals, and how did your school help you do that? And I will let either Evan or Claudia start. I'll give Henry some time to think about his life and think about his future. So I don't know. What do the two of you think?
I guess I can go first, having just graduated. I think that, so I was very fortunate to be able to attend a liberal arts college. And that was an incredible experience that I would more than, with my whole heart recommend, because particularly if you were coming out of high school, not 100% sure about what you want to do. And I think that I can speak for myself. I thought I knew exactly what I wanted to do in my future. And when I arrived at my liberal arts college, being able to take so many different classes as a part of your curriculum, Barnard has a curriculum called the Foundations, and it actually requires you, to take a technology class, to take a science class, to take a whole year of languages, to take history class, anything you can think of. So I majored in history and Italian. So for someone like me, I still was able to take a technology and a science class, and I loved those classes so much, to the point that I kind of ended my college career thinking, I wish I could major in everything. And that's not really a joke. It really is the truth, because being at a liberal arts college, it's encouraged to have a lot of these academic interests. And to at least Barnard and Columbia, they both very much cultivated an environment where I felt that I could intellectually explore so many different disciplines and combine all those disciplines as well, which is really special. And so as I go into the next chapter of my life, which will be grad school or my job, whatever it might be, I think that, not especially going to liberal arts school, I left learning how to learn and how to appreciate really learning many different types of things. And that is not necessarily something that you might get at every school. And of course, every school has a lot to offer. And, if you go to a specialized school, they also will, I think, hopefully teach you how to, learn and appreciate taking an interdisciplinary approach to everything. But what I very much valued about my experience was that I learned how to kind of be good at a lot of different things. And more than that, though, it very much cultivated my inclination to study many different things. And I think that was already there for me, but it encouraged that. And that was really important to me. So that's the benefit of going to liberal arts school, if any of you are thinking about that. And I think lastly, I will say that it really helped me find my place in a community, to the point that I got to learn from alumni, from my peers, from my colleagues, my professors, my TAs. And now going forward, I'm going to be there for future generations. And that community bonding is so special at Barnard and Columbia. And I'm really grateful to have been a part of that community.
I love that. And knowing you, Claudia, it does not surprise me that you left college wanting to study all of the things. That story totally checks out. Evan, tell me about how your college experience has facilitated sort of your future and what you look forward to doing after you graduate.
Sure. So I've only had freshman year. And so I think I'm actually at a good spot to talk about this, because I'm in this transition from the craziness of applying to college, where everyone's like, what are you going to do with your life? And you're like, oh, gee, I don't know. I guess I need to make a plan. And I'm the kind of person that likes to have a plan. But coming into college, especially UVM, I'm in the College of Arts and Sciences, their CAS. Their like tagline is breadth and depth. So they want you to study a lot of different things, and then go in depth on the things that interest you. So
the breadth and then depth.
Yes, exactly. So it's a large research university, but they boast this liberal arts core education, and I think that's perfect. And I think a lot of schools offer that. I think your plan should be, you're gonna go to college with a plan, and then that plan is gonna probably get scrapped, or you're gonna reaffirm what you already know. Like Henry already had said that you like affirmed that you wanted to go into economics, which is awesome. But like I think acknowledging that early on what you think might happen will probably change, and probably change several times. Um, yeah, I think that's about all I have to say.
Yeah, be ready for change, essentially. I love that. And that's good that you're saying like, oh, I like to have a plan, but sometimes your plan can be for change, to change your mind. Henry, what do you think? What do you think that your college education is going to do for you in terms of your goals for the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I loved what both Claudia and Evan said, especially the last thing that Evan reminded me was like, yeah, like I say economics, but I could totally end up as like, a history major or whatnot. Um, so, and I think like the stat out there is like on average, the typical college student changes their major like what, like 6 or 7 times, like at least, right? And I know a ton of people who end up as like a social studies or a liberal arts, they end up with that degree, but they end up going into accounting or investments or doing something totally different from their major. So with that said, at least from my understanding of Harvard, is that Harvard is a lot more keen on developing the person rather than giving you practical skills. Like obviously both are very important, but I know while schools like Stanford or MIT's are all about training you with the technical skills to thrive in the workforce, Harvard cares more about developing us as leaders. So that's why if you look online, basically all of Harvard majors are super broad. Like for me, I'm interested in, like investments or, if other people like interested in accounting, they don't have any of that. They don't have business administration. Anything business related is grouped under econ. Anything political science related is grouped under governments, right? We don't have these very specific majors because Harvard is like, okay, you might not end up using this major in the future. So it's all about developing you as a person. So today I was actually doing some research into what kind of classes I want to take next year and throughout the 4 years. And so I know Claudia said that Columbia has the foundations. Our college curriculum is a mixture of what we call gen eds and what we have as the concentrations. So there's three things. There's the classes you take for your concentration. There's classes you take like general college requirements or gen eds. And then there's electives, which are things to pique your intellectual curiosity, as they like to say. And for me, like having classes in economics and computer science are awesome because it means I could get hired and have a job in the future. But at the same time, I was a little confused at first of why they're making me taking all these art history courses, astronomy courses, philosophy courses, religions, like all these different courses. But truly, like if you understand it, it's they want you to learn contemporary thought and expression. They want you to learn history of the world because they want to fuel your intellectual curiosity, and they want you to take risks and taking classes that you normally would not take as an economics or computer science major, right? So for me, like I'm super excited about the classes that I'm possibly going to take. Like there's a class about happiness that I'm thinking about. There's a class about global health. There's a class about I forgot what it's called, but it's about like brewing beer. This class is about astrology. This class is about rhetoric, etc. Like I'm just genuinely getting really pumped about.
Henry, I want to audit your happiness class. I want to know what that's about. So that to me sounds like, Claudia was surprised at how good her experience with her tech class was because she studied Italian, right? And Evan was talking about like the breadth of classes that were offered. So it sounds like all three of these colleges offer those general education and encourage you all to go out of your comfort zone and to learn. And that can be hugely beneficial for preparing you for whatever you decide to do in the future. Thank you. Oh my goodness. We only have about a minute left. So what I will say is that my last piece of advice, sort of as the moderator for a lot of these panels, and in my career as an educator, I will say that everything truly, going back to something that the four of us were all talking about before, everything truly does work out. And everyone in this webinar who wants to go to college, you absolutely will. You will go to college. And look at Claudia nodding her head. Yep, she knows. It is true. Everything really does work out. You want to have a plan, but you want to be ready for that plan to change. You want to be prepared as you can, so that if you should face rejection, you know that you put your best foot forward and you don't have to take it personally. And having a backup is a great, great, great idea. Tell the story of you. Do things that you are absolutely passionate about. And I think that you can tell that I was joined by three very passionate people today. And I certainly, definitely wish them all the absolute best of luck in their careers as they're starting college and as they're continuing college. I want to thank them for joining me this evening. And I want to thank you so, so much. It's been a pleasure having you at this Ask Me Anything. We have continuous education and outreach through webinars that you can see at appleruth.com. That's AppleRouth.com. Thank you again to all three of the panelists for joining us this evening. Everyone have a wonderful evening. Be safe. Best of luck to you, and good night.